This narrative explores how fear lurks within everyday life and highlights that the most frightening truths are those that are not fabricated. During the 90s, Moscow was affected by a strange, puzzling teenage disappearances. It was only after several years that one of the most disturbing facts came to light. An investigator, fired for breaches of duty, maintained a personal journal. This journal contained detailed accounts of his observations regarding the missing youths and outlined methods by which someone exploited building basements located close to metro stations. The journal was discovered in his rented flat following his death due to an overdose. An entry from October 1996 ended with the strange statement, "They know who is making noise in the ventilation, but they are afraid to check." The matter was not reported in the press. Officially, the diary was dismissed as the product of a mentally unbalanced person. Nevertheless, in 2003, workers found a sealed ventilation duct in the basement of a derelict food shop on Sushevka. Within it were rusty staples, pieces of clothing, and a label from a school backpack. No official statements were made. Second fact. For an extended period, a box containing magnetic tape reels labeled by hand Sleep Audio Analysis, Sector C, 1965, was stored in the Leningrad State University archives. During the laboratory's dissolution in the 2000s, there was an intention to discard these tapes. Nevertheless, one staff member opted to digitize them for her personal archive, as her father, a physiologist, was identified on the reverse side of the box. The audio recordings feature sounds of breathing, rustles, and snoring. Subsequently, abrupt voices emerge, sounding as if they are whispering concurrently in multiple languages. The recording from the 16th reel is especially unnerving. At the 7-minute and 40-second point, a man's voice suddenly exclaims distinctly, "He is standing over me. He doesn't know I can hear him." This is followed by a muffled impact, after which silence prevails. The documentation associated with the tapes lacks details regarding the identity of the recorded individuals and the experimental procedure. All involved parties have long since passed away. The digital version of the recordings vanished from the internet within a week of its release. No comments were issued by any academics. Fact 3. Every spring, from the late 1980s until the early 2000s, new children's toys were discovered in the cemetery of Beryozovka village in the Tomsk region. These items included stuffed bears, mechanical cars, and dolls wearing handmade outfits. Throughout this period, no burials were linked to children. Older villagers reported that at the start of the 20th century, a mass grave from the Civil War era existed on the site. Local lore suggested it contained a group of refugees, among them 5 children. The precise location of this grave remained unknown. An inspector working in 2003 tried to set up surveillance cameras. However, for 3 nights in a row, the equipment failed reliably. Batteries drained, and the camera lenses became internally fogged. Following a brief article in the local newspaper, the village attracted visiting enthusiasts. Yet, the following spring, the toys no longer appeared. The villagers attributed this to the toys being returned. The fourth fact. An unusual item was kept in the museum of the closed city of Ozersk, located in the Chelyabinsk region. It was an iron suitcase without any markings. This suitcase was discovered near the entrance to a forest area close to the Mayak Combine in the year 1984. It took over a week to open. Inside were lead plates wrapped in fiberglass fabric and a notebook with a burnt cover. An inscription made with a pencil on an open page read, "I took them into myself. Let no one touch them." The radiation level within the suitcase was significantly higher than the allowed limit, but the suitcase itself remained cool to the touch and showed no visible damage. The notebook was disposed of according to procedure, but one museum employee made copies of it, which he reportedly kept at his home. This employee passed away in the year 2002 due to a rare form of blood cancer. Shortly before his death, he gave a floppy disk to a coworker, but when they tried to copy its contents, the disk was entirely blank. Consequently, the decision was made to remove the suitcase from the exhibition. Its current location has been unknown ever since. Fact 5. In a village in Bashkiria with fewer than 1,000 inhabitants, teenagers in the 2000s initiated a nocturnal scare event at an abandoned house of culture. The objective was to determine who could endure the longest in the basement, where rumors claimed footsteps were audible. A seventh grader named Artyom failed to reappear at the designated time. After 2 hours, he was discovered seated in a corner, appearing pale, trembling, and unresponsive. Medical professionals diagnosed him with temporary catalepsy resulting from acute psychosis. Subsequently, he conveyed a single statement to his mother: "I heard my voice calling me." An examination of the basement yielded no evidence of other individuals or any acoustic irregularities. Nevertheless, the engineer's report included an unusual annotation made in pencil: "Speech echo present, not captured by microphone, origin undetermined." The House of Culture was demolished in 2009. To the present day, no construction has taken place on its former location within the village, as locals report that machinery malfunctions upon contact with the old foundation. Fact 6. In the year 1972, in Kazakhstan, at the Semipalatinsk polygon, clandestine observations were carried out to assess the impact of radiation on animal behavior. A report that surfaced in declassified archives after the Soviet Union's collapse describes an experiment with a group of rats. These rats were kept in an airtight bunker with a low yet consistent level of radiation. Within 9 days, the rats started building repeating structures using pieces of plastic and wire with their forms similar to radio antennas. A repeat experiment in a different location did not produce the same effect. One of the scientific advisors wrote in an internal memo, "It was as if they were picking up something. We didn't hear it." The study was discontinued. All data was seized and taken in an unknown direction. Original reports are absent, with only a microfilm copy remaining. Seventh fact. In the year 1998, a guard at the archive of a military school near Moscow found a strange metal box in the basement. This box was not recorded in any inventory, but had a Ministry of Defense seal from the 1960s. Inside were several sealed envelopes marked "Instructions in case of waking from sleep." One envelope had been opened, containing a paper with instructions for what to do in case of returning to the same day multiple times. These instructions included: do not look in the mirror after 4:40 p.m., avoid the corridor window between the 3rd and 4th minute, and, if you lose your bearings, lie down on the floor and wait for a signal. The documents were taken away. The official explanation was a prank or an error. Nevertheless, the guard was fired without any explanation, and he later told his neighbors that he was still seeing this day. He vanished 2 years later, and his apartment contained numerous calendars, all showing the same date. Fact 8. A weak radio signal started appearing in the 2000s at an old radar station located on the bank of Lake Onega, which had been retired after the Soviet Union's dissolution. The signal's frequency band was unstable, and it was received between 2 and 3 in the morning. The content was a repeating sequence of digits, similar to one-time cipher codes. During one of these instances, the signal was successfully decoded. The result was a piece of text that resembled a segment from an interrogation record. In this record, an individual identified as Stepan stated that he is living in the 25th iteration and knows who is sending the instructions. This file generated significant interest among amateur radio operators, but it vanished from online forums after a day. A user who had shared the recording later stated that their account was erased and their home equipment sustained damage without any evidence of a break-in. Official agencies disregarded the appeals, despite the fact that unscheduled geophysical monitoring was taking place in the area of the station at that time. The purpose of this monitoring was not disclosed. Fact 9. In 1988, After the catastrophe at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, a video recording made on the day of the accident was discovered during an inspection at a station of the 4th Power Unit. The footage displays a typical scene from a monitoring camera, the control room, 2 operators, all in order. However, from the 9th minute onwards, an unclear, darkening spot emerges in the right corner of the frame. As the situation progresses, the spot intensifies, appearing like a luminescence. Strangely, despite worsening conditions, the camera continues to film without malfunction. 1 minute before the loss of communication, both operators simultaneously turn their heads toward this luminescence, though based on the angle, it should have been beyond their line of sight. The audio consists only of ventilation noise and one brief sound akin to a click. An attempt to digitize the tape was made, but it allegedly melted when loaded into the device. The sole copy was lost in a fire at the archive department in 2001, with its cause not determined. Fact 10. In the year 1974, within the Krasnoyarsk Krai, a village absent from traveler maps was the site where a local schoolboy created a drawing on the club's wall, which he termed a dream map. This map illustrated a house, 12 corridors that were all the same, and a shape akin to a faceless person. The map featured directional arrows and bore the text, "If you exit the door, do not come back, he is close." The drawing was covered with paint the following morning. However, merely 3 days later, 2 additional children, unaware of the initial drawing, started reporting to their parents that everything is repeating and that they were encountering identical stairs at night. One of them detailed a figure that was waiting beyond the 4th door. Medical professionals identified the condition as acute sleep disorder. The family of the boy who initiated these events departed promptly, and shortly thereafter, their residence was completely consumed by fire. The origin of the blaze remained undetermined. Efforts to renovate the club building have been made multiple times since then, but each instance was thwarted by an incident. One laborer was hospitalized following a fall, while another sustained a broken arm on an unoccupied staircase. The residents of the area tend to avoid these occurrences. Fact 11. In the year 1983, a Soviet geological exploration team operating near the Commander Islands registered a seismic signal that bore no resemblance to any known natural or artificial impulse. This signal emanated from a depth greater than 25 kilometers, a depth that was beyond the capabilities of the prevailing technology. The frequency of the impulse recurred every 37 seconds. For a period of 3 days, the frequency gradually shifted upwards, suggesting an attempt to correct the transmitter. One of the experts put forward the idea of a subterranean cavity, but confided to a colleague in an informal discussion that it appears to be a count. The signal stopped after a week. Nevertheless, in 2012, American oceanographers identified pulses that were remarkably similar, once more in the vicinity of Kamchatka. The frequencies and amplitudes matched almost perfectly. This led to a short-lived interest within academic communities, but the subject faded from discussion as rapidly as it had surfaced. According to a prevailing legend among geologists, this signal recurs every 29 years. The next expected appearance is in 2041. Fact 12. In Odessa, at house number 7 on Osipova Street, during the late 1960s, unexplained power cuts started happening. These outages were confined to a single apartment and occurred only at night. Lamps would fail, even when replaced with new ones. Electricians inspected the wiring and found no issues. Consequently, the residents began leaving their radios on. Yet every night, at exactly 2:47, a loud squeal would come from the radio, followed by silence in the room and the extinguishing of the lights. The apartment's occupant, a former chemistry teacher, started a diary. In one of her entries, she noted, "Yesterday, I heard a voice coming from the electrical outlet. It wasn't words, but more like a sensation, as if someone was anticipating my glance. After 3 months, the woman vanished. The apartment door was secured from the inside, with no evidence of a struggle. The diary was left behind. Its final entry contained only 2 words: "He's out." The building was cleared in 1980. A new construction now stands in its place. Current residents report peculiar glitches with their smart light bulbs. 13th fact. A peculiar class register from 1971 has been found in the archives of a school in the Sverdlovsk region. It records a student named V. Filipov who was present at nearly every lesson. Yet, his name is absent from the graduation records. No photos exist, and his classmates' questionnaires have an empty space where his surname should be. The mathematics teacher, who died in the 90s, wrote to a relative, "There's a boy who always sits by the window, but he doesn't answer when called, even though he's always in class." The archivist digitizing the records decided to verify the information and found that the text in all records mentioning Filipov had a slightly different font, suggesting it was added later. An old class photo does show one unlisted silhouette in the back row. It's indistinct, but clearly human. The photograph underwent expert analysis, concluding no evidence of tampering. The school was torn down in 2007. A new building now stands on the site, containing a computer lab where computer dates frequently reset. This issue is confined to a single classroom. Fact 14. In the closing months of the war at Moscow's Kalibra factory, an engineer, Viktor Karpukin, started a personal logbook detailing peculiar equipment failures. He claimed that machine parts would move on their own during the night, and in the mornings, handprints, appearing to be from children, would be visible on the surfaces of metal panels. The records were kept in a straightforward, technical manner, without added emotional expression. The final entry, dated December 1944, read, "Woke up again today. Someone walked through the workshop. 5 steps, 2 seconds, silence. I didn't call them." After this entry, Karpukin vanished. Officially, he was declared missing in action. His workstation was sealed, and the journal was misplaced within the technical paperwork. It was only found in 2016, during the building's reconstruction into a business center, when the archive was handed over to a private library. 3 staff members who worked in the former workshop reported banging sounds in the ventilation, especially during the night. One female employee quit, leaving a note, "I hear someone breathing behind the partition. Every evening. It's empty there." Fact 15. In 1966, a peculiar inmate was brought into a pretrial detention cell in Vorkuta. He lacked any identification and declined to state his name. The duty officer reported that the inmate was courteous and exceptionally composed. He vanished within a day. The cell was secured from the inside, and no escape traces were discovered. On the wall, an inscription read, "Thank you for the reception. I will return if my call is not heard." An inquiry commenced, but the matter was promptly dropped to prevent a scandal. The officer who handled his intake later sent an anonymous letter to the regional department, mentioning, "He knew how to open our door, despite it being a new lock. He never blinked throughout the interrogation, and he spoke as if he had already been incarcerated here for a considerable time." The inmate's handwriting was found to be identical to an inscription on the wall of a 30s-era temporary camp, which stated, "I will return at 40 if no one opens." The cell was removed during repairs, but security personnel continue to refer to it as the polite room. Fact 16 recounts a discovery made on the Black Sea coast in the year 1988. Fishermen located fragments of a lifeboat bearing the marking Caspian 17. This designation did not appear in any official ship registers. Within the wreckage, a wet backpack, a thermos showing signs of rust, and a notebook were discovered. The notebook's contents were severely affected by moisture, yet a single page was preserved. On this page, in what seemed to be the handwriting of an adult male, was written, "They are coming from below. The waves are not carrying us, but pressing. We are returning, but there is no shore." Expert analysis confirmed that the ink used was an army sample from the 1950s. The lifeboat's sail was in better condition than the remaining parts. It was donated to a museum, but after half a year, the fabric unexpectedly darkened and started emitting a faint burning odor. Museum personnel opted to incinerate it, concerned about potential contamination. 2 years later, however, a local newspaper published a notice stating that another piece of debris had been found in the same river's estuary, a thermos lid with the identical engraving. No further wreckage has been found since that time. Despite this, fishermen continue to recount tales of black water which occasionally strikes their boats from beneath. 17th fact. In Podolsk, during the early 90s, a sealed crate of 10 identical Zenit cameras was discovered at a warehouse for retired photo gear. Each camera bore a serial number that was not listed in any inventory. An intern student acquired one of the cameras. Pictures taken with it turned out to be out of focus, showing distortions even in daylight. However, when a picture was taken at midnight, the image was crisp and sharp, consistently featuring a single figure in the center. This figure was a person in a long coat and a wide hat, standing further back in the frame, with their face obscured. Trying to take photos in various places produced the same results. After the 8th such photo, the student destroyed the film rolls. He was unable to keep the camera because it was stolen from his flat. Half a year later, the student went missing. Neighbors recalled hearing him shout at night, "He is closer." 1 year later, a comparable camera with the identical serial numbers appeared at a second-hand market in Yaroslav. The person who bought it disappeared within 3 weeks. Fact 18. In the year 1959, within the Novgorod region, during the construction of an electricity transmission line, a crew of workers encountered an old, evidently pre-war concrete well that had been entirely filled with concrete. Upon removing the upper slab, a vertical shaft was discovered within. Metal brackets were embedded along its walls, functioning like a ladder. At a depth of approximately 20 meters, a metal door was situated, which proved impossible to open. The well was subsequently refilled after a day, and the documentation detailing the discovery was forwarded to Moscow. Nevertheless, an engineer named Koklov retained copies of these documents. His written record stated that the door produced a ringing sound when struck. Koklov vanished a month later. The file containing these materials was passed to his daughter, who released excerpts from it on the internet in the year 2004. She reported that her father had made an annotation, "Behind this door is emptiness, but the emptiness hums." This online post achieved the status of an internet legend, and the veracity of the records was substantiated by archivists. The well has since been covered over, but a distinct circular area remains visible on satellite imagery, where vegetation fails to grow even during the summer months. Fact 19. In an apartment within a Stalin-era building on Vernadsky Avenue in Moscow, starting from the early 2000s, the ceiling light began to flicker daily at a specific time, 4:11 a.m., even when it was turned off. Electricians were unable to diagnose the problem, confirming that both the wiring and the breaker were functioning correctly. The family opted to install a night vision camera. During the second night of observation, the camera recorded an unusual exposure surge, resembling someone moving quickly past the lens. A frame-by-frame analysis revealed a vague figure positioned at the door in one of the shots. This figure was not illuminated by any light or cast any shadows. 2 weeks later, the apartment's owner started experiencing a recurring dream. "I open the door and see myself standing outside." Following a consultation with a psychologist, the dream ceased, but the lights flickering persisted. After a year, the tenants vacated the apartment. The new occupants report no peculiar occurrences, with one exception. Their doorbell has never functioned. This applies to both the old and the new doorbell and to any of its buttons. Fact 20. In the 70s, foresters in the Tumian region reported an unusual find. In the heart of the woods, there was a wooden table with 3 chairs. These items were clearly man-made, but had darkened with age. A lamp sat on the table, its wire disappearing into the ground, but it was not connected to any power source. An inspection confirmed the absence of electricity. The chairs, upon closer examination, were crafted from intertwined tree roots with no evidence of being cut or sawn. A forester named Ivanov took a photograph of the discovery, but the resulting image contained only grass with no trace of the objects. He resolved to revisit the location, but was unable to find it again, even with exact coordinates. He was found a week later, 2 kilometers from the original site. He was barefoot, his palms were burned, and he kept repeating, "I was sitting in my place, and someone was watching, until he passed out." Ivanov subsequently ceased working in the forest. The tree trunks within that specific area remained slightly inward, as if subjected to pressure from a heavy object originating from the center. Fact 21st. In the year 1966, an operator at a military radio station in the Khabarovsk region detected an unusual signal. This signal recurred with an exact frequency of 66 beats per minute. The initial assumption was a fault in the equipment. However, the signal did not cease, and the person on duty described the sensation as being felt more inside the chest than through hearing, like a heart not your own beating beside you. The phenomenon persisted for 4 nights in a row, consistently between 2 a.m. and 2:11 a.m. On the 5th night, it ceased. Yet, precisely 1 year and 1 day later, the signal reappeared. It was now double its previous strength, commencing with an unclear low drone. A radio engineer made a recording of this signal on a magnetic tape and dispatched it to Moscow. No reply was forthcoming. 2 months later, he took his own life. His suicide note stated, "It knocked from the other side. I couldn't stand it." The tape reel vanished. In a technical publication, an annotation was made in pencil, twice 66, and no more breathing. Fact 22nd. Within a hospital in Vladivostok, specifically in room 9, a patient reported being woken each night by a water smell. The doctors disregarded this, but the night nurse started observing an oddity. At 3:12 in the morning, a wet mark would manifest on the ceiling, resembling a leak, despite the presence of an empty attic directly above the room. Investigations confirmed the ceiling was dry. The patient passed away from a heart attack 3 nights later. Prior to her demise, she was able to state, "I understood it wasn't water. It is he who breathes through the ceiling." Following her death, the room was sealed, yet the spot continued to appear. Attempts were made to cover it with paint and plaster, but it consistently reappeared in the identical location at the precise same hour. Ultimately, the ceiling was taken apart, revealing a wooden beam bearing nails from a former suspended floor. Attached to one nail was a piece of rope, and nearby was an inscription, "Do not wake me until it is dry." The beam was dismantled and removed. The spot ceased to appear, until a night when plumbers happened to enter the room. They mentioned a smell of a pond and of something else as well. Fact 23rd. In 1987, a planned inventory at a printing house warehouse in Yaroslav led to the discovery of a box containing unrecorded copies of a nameless book. The book's cover was dark gray, and its spine displayed only the digits 2031. When a worker opened the first page, he encountered a list of surnames and dates. Initially, he believed it to be a faulty print run. However, upon reading further, he found his own name. Beside it was the date of his death, scheduled for 2 days later. The book was promptly removed. According to hearsay, it was confiscated by management officials. 2 days later, the worker perished in an accident before reaching his shift. Subsequently, another employee reported seeing a comparable book in the attic, which appeared to update itself with new entries upon opening. In 1991, the building was destroyed by fire. The official cause cited was an electrical fault. However, the fire originated from the attic where the book was purportedly kept. While examining the ashes, one firefighter discovered a fragment of a scorched page containing a partial sentence. "If you read it, the term has begun." He kept this piece of paper as a protective charm. 1 year later, he too died. His death occurred precisely on schedule. Fact 24th. In the early 2000s, in Kaliningrad, in a private apartment, a family started observing their dreams aligning. The husband, wife, and their daughter, all three experienced dreams of the identical house, a staircase, an unoccupied room, and a shadow behind a glass door. At first, they attributed this to chance, but one morning the daughter stated, "He has come closer. He is by the door. He says, 'Do not open it.'" The mother, feeling fear, began to record all the dreams. The dreams were recurring with the exact arrangement of items. In one dream, the door was opened. The girl did not awaken that morning. Medical professionals were unable to establish the reason. Her body was in normal condition, yet her heart ceased to beat. The mother ceased her recordings, but the father, overcome with desperation, resumed them. 1 month later, he vanished. He failed to arrive from work, and there were no indications of forced entry. Only his note, ripped from a notebook, was left behind. "I opened the door. He knows that I remember." The apartment has been rented out rarely since that time. Residents there occasionally report peculiar mirror-like stains on the wallpaper and the sound of footsteps during the night, despite the fact that it is the top floor. Fact 25th. In the year 1979, an unusual event took place at Lokhanya Station in the Pskov Oblast. A freight train, proceeding on schedule and without any issues, came to an abrupt halt within a forest area. The train engineer stated that an individual dressed in a long, dark garment had appeared on the tracks, prompting him to engage the emergency brakes to avoid a collision. Upon inspection, it was found that there was no one present on the tracks, nor were there any footprints or indications of recent activity. Nevertheless, the rails in that particular location were considerably colder than the surrounding track, as if the metal components had recently been brought down to a temperature of 0 degrees. The engineer who performed the inspection suffered a frostbitten hand from touching the surface. Approximately 2 days later, the station's duty officer noted an addition to the movement log, purportedly written by the engineer. "He crossed the rails. Time has begun." The engineer denied having written this statement. The document was seized, but a photo of the entry, captured on the engineer's mobile phone, emerged on the internet during the 2010s. Accompanying it was a comment, "He walks on the sleepers. He skips every third one." Fact 26th. Construction workers in Vladivostok discovered an unusual staircase leading down in a disused section of an old technical school. This staircase was not indicated on the building's plans. It had 7 flights, concrete walls, and no decorative finishing. A metal door numbered 0 was located at the bottom. The lower area had no electricity, but a camera sent down there operated without external power for almost 48 hours. During this time, the camera showed only darkness, with occasional faint reflections. At the 36th minute, a sound was first heard, a soft, rhythmic knocking, as if someone was walking up the steps from below. The camera was removed, and the recordings vanished from the hard drive. The only remaining piece, 3 seconds long, features a deep voice whispering, "We've returned. It's all a cycle." After this event, the room was sealed with concrete. Nevertheless, guards complained that sometimes at night, a humming sound, like footsteps in an empty basement, can be heard from under the floor. Fact 27th. In the year 1964, in Kuibysh, which is now Samara, a student named Gennady started showing exceptional memory skills. In just a few days, he managed to learn the entire telephone directory, several pages of the legal code, and all the city's public transport timetables. His parents believed it was a temporary increase in his talents. However, the boy began filling notebooks with strange writings in Old Slavonic, Latin, and some German. He stated that he had learned to listen during the night, and that if one hears correctly, a stairway will be revealed. Medical professionals diagnosed him with schizophrenia. Yet, one doctor who was familiar with ancient languages found a phrase in the boy's notes, "Iterum per scalas." This phrase means, again up the stairs. A week later, the boy vanished from his locked hospital room during the night. The windows were secured with bars, the doors were locked, and security personnel were present. No suspicious activity was captured by the surveillance cameras. His personal items were left as they were. However, on the final page of his notebook, a single word was written in fresh ink: gone. Fact 28. In 1988, loggers in the village of Belaya Gora, Komi, discovered a burnt concrete slab at the edge of a ravine. The slab was smooth, featuring a central coordinate grid and 5 concentric circles. Adjacent to it were a scorched bench and 3 seemingly sealed metal cylinders. Inside one of the cylinders, workers found a paper scroll dated December 29. The second cylinder was empty. The third resisted even autogenous cutting. The paper was given to the local museum but vanished 2 days later. One logger subsequently experienced panic attacks, reporting he saw something like a shadow sitting in the circle, and heard a voice state, "You are not the one who was supposed to come." He was admitted for medical care. His treating physician noted the patient's accurate knowledge of celestial star positions on specific dates, including future ones. The slab was later interred. Satellite imagery reveals an unusual circular pattern in the surrounding trees, suggesting the forest area is organized in concentric arrangements. Fact 29th. In the year 2015, in Viborg, a box of dictaphone cassettes was discovered in the attic of an old house scheduled for demolition. The envelope it came with was marked Night Archive. The tapes contained dozens of hours of night recordings. At first, there were only the sounds of creaking floorboards and faint street noises. But from about the 20th minute of one cassette, phrases started to be heard in the room. It was a whisper, repeating the same Russian words, but distorted, as if looped. "You are not yet asleep. He waited for you to blink." Then came crying, and after that, distinct, cold speech. "He is inside the walls. He always was." Technical analysis indicated that the dictaphone was indeed in an enclosed space at the time of recording, and the phrases were picked up not from the outside, but as if they emerged from the tape itself. The individual who digitized the files later reported starting to wake up every night at 3:33 a.m. and seeing a moving silhouette behind the curtains. They moved away from the city. The house where these items were found burned down before demolition. The reason for this was not established. Fact 30th. In 1991, a plaque was found attached to the inner side of the door of an old crypt in a cemetery near Tula. It was hammered in with nails and read, "I am not inside, I am outside, open." The crypt had been sealed in 1952 and had remained unopened since then. The metal hinges were so rusted that the lid had to be cut off. The interior of the crypt was empty. It contained no coffin or remains, only a layer of dust and an old flashlight with a depleted battery. The flashlight's marking indicated it was produced in the 1980s. The presence of the flashlight in the sealed premises could not be explained. A week later, a visitor in a neighboring plot reported seeing someone in a black overcoat heading towards the crypt, with their gaze directed at the ground. Security was absent at that moment, and the cameras were not operational. The only footage from that night showed a shadow flickering across the screen at 4:44 a.m. This shadow was too tall and blurry to be identified as human. Subsequently, the camera report vanished from the archive. A note was found instead on a piece of paper. "Don't write. He is listening." Fact 31. During the early 2000s, cable upgrades were being performed at an underground metro station in Kharkiv. An electrician, while going down a service tunnel, found an old passage concealed behind the paneling. This passage led to an unmapped area. He decided to explore it and walked approximately 60 meters. The tunnel then sharply terminated in a round chamber with rusty doors lining its circumference. None of the doors opened except for one that was partially open. Inside, there was a bare room containing a mirror and a malfunctioning wall clock displaying 3:21. The electrician took a photo of his discovery. However, when the film was developed, the mirror area on the photograph showed only darkness, with a faint outline of a figure standing in the right corner. Subsequently, he stated that he began hearing noises from behind his apartment walls and would wake up precisely at 3:21 each night. He vanished 2 weeks later. The tunnel passage was resealed. All records of his existence were removed from the maintenance logs. Nevertheless, on a forum dedicated to stalking, a user identified as Door321 posted, "He waits behind the mirror. If you went in, don't turn around." The user's account was removed within 5 minutes. Fact 32nd. In the mid-1980s, an experimental sleep technique was developed at a psychophysiology research institute in the Moscow region. This method aimed to directly stimulate dreams using sound cues. Participants listened to various sound sequences, such as rustling, faint bell tolls, breathing sounds, and water splashes. One subject, a young lieutenant, started reporting that the sound wouldn't switch off. He claimed that even when awake, he heard his name being called, always from his left and below. After a month, he ceased to sleep. His eyes remained open, his heart rate increased, but his brain appeared to be stuck in a sleep phase. Medical professionals termed this a phase perception shift. On the final day of the study, he began to repeatedly say, "I am going to where the sound was. I have figured out where it is." He was discovered deceased 3 hours later, seated in a lotus posture with silent headphones on. Nearby on the wall, a message written in pencil read, "You were listening to something different from what was played." The experimental data vanished from the archives in 1993. Only the cover survived, bearing the label Step 6. Fact 33rd. In one of the towers of an old estate near Lviv, workers found a sealed room during renovation work in 2002. The walls had a double plaster layer, and an iron plate was installed in the doorway. Inside was a small, square room with no windows, a dilapidated armchair, a metal tray, and an unjacketed notebook. The initial entry stated, "I am a volunteer. I was locked in to check who knocks at 3. The last entry was from November 1961. The author wrote about hearing breathing on the other side of the wall and that the day repeats, only the sounds swap places. From the notebook's midpoint, the writing switched to mirror script. The concluding lines read, "If you are reading this, it means I didn't get out. Do not open the second wall." No other doors were discovered. A face materialized in the photo of the sealed wall. Indistinct, like a print, as if someone had pressed their forehead against it from within. Research indicated the plaster was nearly double its usual thickness in that spot. However, it was prohibited to disturb it. The room was resealed, without any signage. Fact 34th. In 1997, a file labeled Route N0, a null, was found in an archive of the Ministry of Transport in St. Petersburg. It contained a report concerning a bus route that ran from 1983 to 1985. The bus would leave at 11 p.m. from its final stop by the cemetery, traveling through peripheral streets that have since been demolished for construction. The documents indicated that the route was not officially registered, but it did include drivers' names, timetables, and trip logs. A former conductor, whom journalists tracked down, confessed that the bus had driven to a location without a road a few times. He stated, "They were there, without faces, just wearing trench coats. Nobody boarded, but the doors would open." When questioned about the identity of they, he responded, "I don't know." But when a driver failed to return, his bus arrived at the base by itself, empty, driverless. The file was subsequently removed, but a copy remained in a backup system. The final page of the route documentation had a handwritten note in pencil. If you board after the cemetery, you won't get off until morning. If you get off, you are no longer yourself. Fact 35th. In 2013, while a new metro station was being built in Yekaterinburg, an excavator encountered an unusual metal plate beneath the ground. Upon raising the plate, it was discovered to be a shaft cover. Underneath was an ideally circular chamber, tiled with mirrors. The depth was approximately 15 meters. Its base was smooth and vacant. Yet, every time a camera was sent down, sound vanished. The image came through, but with no noise whatsoever, as if all sound frequencies were being suppressed. During one attempt, the camera sent back a picture showing a reflection in the mirror of a figure that was not in the frame. It was positioned to the side, outside the lens's field. The transmission stopped a second later, and the apparatus malfunctioned. The shaft was backfilled the next day. One of the engineers on the project subsequently went missing. His final log entry in his digital diary stated, "Sound is the mirror. It's in the reflection. It's safe until heard." The official records of the find made no mention of it. The plate was officially identified as a component of an old rainwater drainage system. Nevertheless, it was no longer approached by anyone. Fact 36th. In a village near Penza in the 1970s, local schoolchildren recounted tales about a strange individual who would appear in a field at night. He stood still, like a pillar, but if one blinked or turned away, he would shift his position. One of the children chose to get closer. As his mother told it, he came back with his hair turned gray. Years went by, and the story faded. Then, in 1992, while renovating an old farmstead, they unearthed a burnt foundation with a staircase leading to nothing. A sign above the stairs read, "Where not to go." Nearby on the wall, a child had scrawled in charcoal, "I went anyway." No official records were found, only pieces of toys and a tarnished school button were recovered. A photo from the dig reveals a long shadow, despite the sun being directly overhead that day. The villagers suggest not lingering there for more than a few seconds, mentioning that ears start to buzz and eyes go dark. It's like someone is slowly looking up from below. Fact 37th. In the year 1980, an instructor at a music college in Omsk recorded his students' etudes on a reel. During playback, he noticed faint tapping and a voice singing, "He walks for the notes, a shadow between the keys, in the gaps between the pieces." Investigations revealed the recording was original and unedited. The students insisted they heard nothing out of the ordinary. The following day, the instructor opted to re-record the material. However, during this second recording, the voice grew louder. In one particular track, when a student played an incorrect note, the tape recorder suddenly malfunctioned, and the recording captured only the phrase, "You played it wrong. Now he has heard." The instructor vanished a week later. His reels were discovered a month after that. All the tapes had been cut into uniform lengths and carefully laid out to resemble piano keys. Each segment bore an inscription, appearing to be written in blood. "The door opens on E-flat." The tape recorder seized up. The final sound emitted was a note that the college subsequently prohibited from being played without accompaniment. This was treated as a joke, although the joke itself was not well recalled. Fact 38th. In 1994, on the outskirts of Chita, a group of teenagers found an old wooden carriage. It was situated on a severed piece of railway tracks, which were already covered in grass. The carriage's interior was bare, save for one leather suitcase and a book. The book was empty, its pages all white. The suitcase had a lock, but no key. One of the teenagers, the boldest, took the book home. 3 days later, he started recording his dreams in the blank book. He stated that the dreams were identical each night. He was traveling in that carriage, a man in a trench coat sat next to him, and beyond the windows lay total darkness. There was no scenery or light visible. The only sound was the rhythmic clatter of the wheels. On the fifth night, the boy did not wake up. Medical professionals were unable to identify the reason. The final recorded page of the book contained a single sentence. "We are still riding. He said we would stop soon, but there is no way out." Attempts were made later to force the suitcase open. It contained only soil and an unnumbered token. The carriage had vanished from its location within a week. The rails had become rusty. However, one night, a sound was again heard from that spot, resembling a moving train, but without any lights or horn. Fact 39th. In 1972, while training in Karelia, a team of radio operators noticed an unusual disturbance in their radio communications. The disturbance always happened at the same time, 0444, and lasted for a minute before the signal cleared up. The sound was like a child whispering, interspersed with clicking noises. One operator mapped the signal spectrogram onto the local terrain, creating a diagram that closely resembled the layout of their barracks. A specific spot on the diagram marked an old storage closet. Inside this closet, they discovered a wooden box with a lid. Within the box were a military overcoat and a note that read, "If I open my eyes again, send me back." The overcoat belonged to a soldier who had perished in 1944. Yet, the medical examiner who inspected it reported the fabric was new, showing no wear. On the lining, a label bore a future date, August 21, 2026. Following a publication about this signal in a military magazine in 2001, the radio service in that region started to go dead every year at the same minute, for exactly 1 minute. The airwaves were silent with just one click, like a footstep. Fact 40th. In the late 1980s, dacha owners in the Voronezh suburbs observed a wet trail by an old shed each morning. It appeared as though someone was exiting the forest barefoot and walking towards the door. There were no tracks leading back. The shed was dilapidated, with a decaying roof containing only old furniture and refuse bags. A teenager who chose to stay there overnight went missing. He was located 2 days later, several kilometers away from the property, with blue lips and incoherent speech, muttering, "He wanted me to stay. I saw him waiting under the stairs." The shed lacked any stairs. However, upon dismantling the floor, a downward passage was revealed, the remnants of a water-filled basement. A charcoal inscription on the concrete wall read, "I did not call. He came on his own. He needs a second." The passage was sealed, but after half a year, vandals forced entry into the shed again. One of them later reported hearing a voice from beneath the floorboards. No one spends the night there anymore. Furthermore, the shed door, even when secured with a lock, is discovered slightly ajar each night. The opening is approximately 2 centimeters, facing inwards. Fact 41. In the year 2007, in Nizhny Novgorod, a student on a trip to the regional museum unintentionally opened a box that had been sealed as per the rules. Inside, he found sheets of heavy paper folded in two and a small photo album for children. The photographs depicted typical courtyards, buildings, and apartment building entrances, but notably, they were all devoid of people. The final photograph was distinct. It showed a dark hallway with an elevator door open at the far end and a ball resting on the floor before it. No labels or descriptions accompanied the images. The student kept one of the sheets. It bore a message scrawled at an angle. "If you found it, it's already on its way." A week later, he fell from his own home's window late at night in absolute silence. His parents stated that he feared elevators and always used the stairs. However, on the day he died, he inexplicably rode the elevator to the 8th floor. A neighbor from the floor below heard a sound. The elevator door shut and then immediately reopened. A ball belonging to someone else was discovered on the floor near the elevator afterward. A child's ball, yellow with black stripes. No child in that building had lost a ball like that. Fact 42. In 1965, meteorologists in Arkhangelsk detected an unusual flash above the White Sea. It was dark red and oval, and it lasted for slightly more than a minute. A ship within a 20-kilometer range also picked up the signal. One radio operator noted in the ship's log, "It seemed to be watching. We were blinded for a second." This event was disregarded until a seaplane crashed in the same spot a month later. The pilot of this seaplane, just before it hit the water, managed to broadcast only 2 words: "He has returned." All lives were lost. The investigation was concluded. However, 40 years later, a private archive yielded a microfilm containing a radiogram from the lighthouse at Cape Corabelny. This radiogram went unreceived due to an incorrect frequency. It included coordinates and a brief message. "Close your eyes if it gets hot. He is studying." Experts suggest it was a technical glitch. Notably, the lighthouse that sent the radiogram was deactivated that very night, even though its operational period was officially scheduled to continue until year-end. The cause of its deactivation remains undetermined. Fact 43rd. Volunteers discovered a wooden cabinet with patient files on the premises of a former hospital in the Smolensk region, which ceased operations in 1993. While most documents had decayed, one envelope remained sealed. It contained the medical chart of a patient identified as L, admitted in 1981. His diagnosis included nocturnal hallucinations and altered time perception. Most notably, the attending physician's daily entries detailed the patient's precognitive abilities. He knew who would enter the ward, what the radio would broadcast, and which button I would press on the thermometer. 10 days later, L reported an inability to see tomorrow, stating he was obstructed by the one behind the glass. The patient vanished during the night of the 11th day. All exits, including windows and doors, were secured. The only trace left on the interior of the glass cabinet was a forehead imprint and a brief finger-written message, "He saw through." The physician left his post soon after. The hospital's closure followed without any stated reasons. The ward's walls are still standing, and one still bears a mark resembling a print, as if it were pushed into the glass from within. Fact 44th. In 1988, the city television tower in Samara experienced an equipment failure. One channel unexpectedly started transmitting a still image of a black staircase descending, along with a countdown, 00, 10, 00, 9. The broadcast lasted for 30 seconds before the picture vanished. No staff member confessed to starting the signal, and no evidence of the transmission was found in the broadcast equipment. The newsroom received numerous calls asking for an explanation all evening, but none was officially given. A week later, a technician who managed the signal jumped from the same tower. His final note simply stated, "I reached 0. It opened." Subsequently, the city was abuzz with rumors suggesting that on specific nights, standing at the base of the TV tower with eyes closed, one could hear footsteps on the iron stairs, as if someone were ascending. However, there would be one extra set of footsteps. Then, a single, brief knock would be heard, followed by silence. It was at this point that one should open their eyes, if they had the courage. Fact 45th. In Lipetsk, at the beginning of the 1990s, a central library employee found a narrow cabinet in the basement that was not on the inventory lists. Inside this cabinet was a pile of books with no covers. All pages were empty, except for the last page of each book. These pages had neatly printed names, dates, and the phrase, "You closed your eyes, he succeeded." Several names matched records in city obituaries from the past few months. A librarian named Nikolai K. wrote down this discovery in his personal diary and started watching to see if the book would get new entries. After 3 weeks, he saw a new name, his own. It had a date 2 days ahead. He attempted to prove it wrong, stayed home, turned off the power, and locked his doors. However, on the night before the given date, neighbors heard a disturbance in his apartment, and the next morning found him in his chair, having died of a heart attack. All the books from the cabinet vanished. Only one page with a new name was left on the floor. The library and its administration did not conduct any more inventories. The staff reported that the cabinet appeared to have melted into the wall. Fact 46. In 1976, in the village of Meshcherskoye, Moscow Oblast, a mirror was discovered by teenagers in a wooden church that had been closed and was in a semi-ruined state. The mirror was situated near the altar wall. Its surface was dull and dusty. One of the boys, as recalled, approached the mirror and remarked that the reflection showed no clocks. Within days, he started experiencing seizures. He would insist, "They are inside. They don't move when you watch." The local paramedic, upon inspecting the location, observed that the mirror reflected only the walls and floor, not the ceiling. When viewed from the side, a staircase, which was not physically present, appeared in the reflection. This staircase led downwards into an area of the church with no access. On the same night, the church building partially collapsed. The boy was admitted to a psychiatric clinic and ceased to speak. The orderlies found a piece of mirror glass on his pillow with the inscription scratched into it. "They showed me the time. I didn't come back." The church was destroyed by a mysterious fire 3 months later. The cause of the fire remained undetermined. The site is now a field. However, during the summer, the grass there grows in circular patterns. Fact 47th. In Novosibirsk, during 1983, a notice board in a dormitory housing physics students displayed a sheet with a table. This table featured columns for time, date, and the word transition. The identity of the person who posted it was unknown. One student, Mikhail S., observed that the specified date, November 14th at 2:16, matched his recurring episodes of sleepwalking. He resolved to be awake at that particular time. He recounted that he rose from his bed and perceived in the mirror not his own image, but an empty room extending into the distance. He took a step forward and, at that instant, regained consciousness. He discovered himself standing barefoot on a street 2 blocks from the dormitory. He vanished a month later. His room contained only the identical table, now bearing a new date and the inscription "Next" below it. The table was taken down, but after several years, a replica emerged in another dormitory. This new version also showed the same times and a different surname at the bottom. Verification confirmed that the student identified by the surname had perished in a traffic accident the subsequent day. The table disappeared. The individual responsible for posting it was never seen again. Nevertheless, the times indicated on the table are consistently adhered to. Fact 48. In Orenburg, during the mid-90s, an archive employee discovered a film reel that was not marked in the catalog. It was signed Lecture #0. The recording features a dark hall, the camera is placed in a corner, and a podium is visible. Behind it, a person in a gray suit stands, their face unclear. They speak distinctly, slowly, about how silence is a form of observation and the absence of noise does not mean the absence of sound. Following this, they enumerate numbers and dates. One of them matches the day of an accident at a nearby substation. The following dates were set in the future. At the moment they say the word choice, the camera jolts and the image becomes distorted. The last phrase on the recording, "If you hear this, you are already inside. The lecture has begun." The archivist, after watching the recording, soon found himself in a psychiatric hospital. His diary was later passed to his family. It contained only the same words, written many times. "Zero is not a beginning, it is an entrance." The film reel was destroyed, but a rumor circulates that a copy appears on the internet. It runs for exactly 9 minutes, and at the end, a voice asks, "Is your silence ready?" Fact 49th. In a mining village near Kemerovo in the year 1971, residents reported a series of sounds described as crying from beneath the earth. At first, the inhabitants believed these sounds originated from the ventilation machinery. However, an elderly miner known as Uncle Nikolai stated that he had previously heard similar noises in the 1940s, preceding the collapse of a mine tunnel where his entire crew had died. This humming sound, which escalated into a moan, persisted for several minutes before fading. The incident was not officially reported at the time, but the sound reappeared. A junior geologist, newly assigned to the location, proposed making a recording of the noise. They lowered a microphone into an old, abandoned mine shaft. The resulting audio featured a low, rhythmic hum, akin to distant footsteps. At the 44th second, a voice could be heard saying, "I am waiting for you to open the door. You are already digging." 1 week later, mine shaft number 7 suffered a collapse, resulting in the deaths of 2 miners. The geologist was subsequently relocated to a different area. Before his departure, he left a cassette containing the recording in the site's watchhouse. The cassette's cover bore a message written in charcoal. "Do not turn on near the ground. He hears himself." Fact 50. In one of St. Petersburg's communal apartments, formerly a merchant's mansion, peculiar events began to unfold in the late 1990s. In a particular room, an old telephone, which was disconnected and lacked any wires or a power outlet, would ring consistently. The device served as a decorative piece. Each day, exactly at 5:18 a.m., it would start ringing, initially quietly, then with increasing volume. The occupants tried to move the phone, but it always reappeared the following day. They once attempted to film the ringing. The recording contained clicks, followed by a brief voice saying, "I'm still on the stairs. Open up." A repairman was called. He opened the phone's body and found it empty inside, with no coil or speaker. Inside, there was only a note, folded 3 times, stating, "You didn't hear him, but now you have." After a month, the neighbors living below moved out, reporting that they heard footsteps at night on a staircase that led to nowhere. The house was subsequently sold, and its furnishings were removed. However, during a basement inspection, an old telephone line was found. One of its wires led directly into a brick wall. The exact path of the wire was not identified. It was observed that the wall at that point was warmer, even during winter. Fact 51st. In 1985, in Kazan, a programmer was developing a system for the automatic generation of train schedules. During testing, he input random time intervals into the program and observed that the system produced precise matches with actual railway accidents from previous years. He decided to replicate the experiment and received new dates. An accident occurred 2 weeks later on the specific railway section that the program had predicted. The system's time code was highlighted in red, accompanied by a comment not entered by the programmer. "Сбой подтвержден. Повтор разрешен. Malfunction confirmed. Repeat aloud." He shut down the system, but upon every restart, it would automatically restore itself and show a single screen. A black background with white text reading, "Вы в маршруте." You are on the route. On his final attempt to remove the program, his own name appeared on the screen along with a date. He departed the city the following day and vanished. The hard drive containing the system was archived. Yet, several years later, it powered on without any external power source or access. The monitor displayed only the phrase, "Следующий остановится там, где не ждет." The next will stop where it is not expected. Fact 52nd. During the demolition of walls in an old Krasnoyarsk house previously belonging to a theater artist, workers found drawings hidden behind the wallpaper. These were all done in graphite, appearing as if scratched by a nail, depicting rooms, staircases, and doors. Each drawing featured a figure with its face turned upside down. Accompanying these were the phrases, "He waits behind the curtains," "Do not stand on the 5th flight of stairs," "If he turns around, wake up." Photographs were taken of the walls, but the film was fogged. A fragment of plaster molding bearing the inscription, "Whispers when you are almost asleep," was taken by one of the construction workers as a memento. He was discovered in the building's entryway that same evening, unconscious. He recovered physically, but lost his ability to speak. Eventually, he managed to write only a single word: returned. The house was subsequently torn down. Nevertheless, local accounts suggest that at night, on the site of the former foundation, the sound of footsteps on a staircase that isn't there can be heard. Lingering in this area for a longer period might give the impression of the air thickening, with a silent, close, and intangible presence behind you, waiting for you to turn around. Fact 53rd. In Tver, during 1990, Galina rented an apartment in a building constructed before the war. Things were ordinary until she began to hear a peculiar clicking sound every night at precisely 2:04 a.m. Initially, she attributed it to mice, then to a meter. However, the sound originated from the wall adjacent to her bed. After a fortnight, she awoke to the click occurring directly beside her ear. A crack materialized on the wall, widening daily. On one occasion, Galina pressed her ear to it and detected a knocking sound. It seemed as though someone on the other side was responding with identical knocks. In a state of alarm, she vacated the premises. A year later, her neighbor reported the appearance of a crack in the identical location. She also heard a voice during the night stating, "I am nearly there. Do not disturb." The wall was breached. No void was found. It contained only aged brickwork and a rolled-up paper inserted into a crevice. Within it was a newspaper clipping from 1938 and the message, "He is still pounding. Do not open." The newspaper was forwarded to the archives, and the crack reappeared, this time on the 3rd floor. Fact 54th. In 1977, in Sevastopol, a group of schoolchildren were walking by the coast and found a cave that had previously gone unnoticed. Its entrance was narrow and dark. One of the boys decided to enter it with a flashlight, while the others waited. 15 minutes went by, then 20. They started shouting. Their friend emerged from the darkness, wearing the same clothes but remaining silent. He offered no answers to their questions, only stared. It was later determined that he lacked the scar on his cheek that the original boy possessed. Furthermore, the size of his shoes was different. The actual child was located inside the cave 2 days later. He was in a state of panic, stating that he had continuously heard breathing behind him, his voice being mimicked, and his every movement being echoed. The imposter boy vanished. Subsequently, the parents shared that their son's mirror image sometimes displayed a silhouette that was a bit taller and indistinct, as if the glass held a memory of another. The cave was sealed with rocks. Nevertheless, local children continue to avoid it. The reason is that standing at the entrance allows one to hear their breath being copied, with a slight lag, following a half step behind. Fact 55th. In Yekaterinburg, in the year 2001, a young woman named Alyona purchased an old-fashioned alarm clock from a flea market. The clock was not functional, but Alyona was fond of its visual appeal and positioned it on a shelf in her bedroom. Several nights later, it began to tick. Alyona concluded that the spring might have engaged, and she wound it. It wound successfully. The clock would wind itself each evening, irrespective of her presence at home. Furthermore, at 3 o'clock and 7 minutes each night, its hands would commence a backward movement. Alyona attempted to discard the alarm clock by placing it in a garbage container. However, by morning, it had returned to its initial location. Subsequently, she placed it on the stairs. The following morning, she discovered it at her threshold, ticking. At this point, it no longer displayed the correct time, but merely rotated its hands in a circular fashion. After a few days, she perceived the alarm clock in the quiet, counting not minutes, but steps. These steps followed sequentially, creating the impression of someone entering her apartment gradually in a clockwise direction. The day the hands ceased their movement marked the end of her life. Neighbors reported that on that particular night, all electronic clocks on their floor had stopped. The time indicated was 3:07. They did not resume operation. Fact 56th. Near Tomsk, in a forest, surveyors found an old signpost in 1982. It was a rusty metal pole with just one inscription: "You have passed." No arrows or maps were present. Locals insisted it was a new addition. An engineer followed the implied direction, relying on moss and a compass. He returned 40 minutes later, pale and quiet, with neck scratches. He later remarked, "A forest shouldn't have a staircase, but it did." He described a stone stairway going down, without handrails, into darkness. Only he saw it. He quit a week later. Efforts to excavate the pole failed. The metal went deep underground, and even an autogenous torch couldn't cut it. Local laborers declined to come near. One commented, "It reveals itself to those who are prepared." The signpost disappeared after 2 years. A round, burnt patch in the grass was left behind, resembling the mark of something heavy, or a footstep. Fact 57th. During renovation work in room 311 of an old Ulyanovsk hotel closed in 1995, a floor opening was discovered by workers. Under the linoleum, they found a hatch that wasn't indicated on the building's blueprints. This hatch led to a square, concrete-walled room containing only a wooden chair. Fingernail scratches on the wall above the chair read, "Sit until he passes. If you stand, he will reach you." The concrete floor around the chair was polished to a smooth finish, suggesting repeated circular movement, perhaps hundreds of times. The engineer who went down with a camera experienced a non-functioning flash on his first attempt. His second photograph captured a faint, see-through figure in the right-hand corner. Following this, the engineer suffered episodes, reporting a sensation of being followed by footsteps even when stationary. He vanished a month later. The opening was cemented over, and the room was secured. Nevertheless, the security staff reported hearing scratching sounds from beneath the floor on some nights, consistently at 3:11. It sounded like someone was ascending, but unhurriedly. Fact 58th. In the city of Cherepovets in the year 1989, a retired woman whose surname was T reported that at night, items of clothing in her wardrobe would shift. A dress would be found in another location, a coat would be buttoned differently, and on one occasion, a shirt appeared that she had never used. Her relatives attributed this to her age. However, her granddaughter, who was spending the night at her grandmother's, heard someone opening the wardrobe doors during the night. This happened without any sound, without a single creak, just a quiet click, and then darkness returned. She got up and peered inside. Within, there was only clothing. Yet one of the hangers was gently rocking, as if it had just been released. On that very night, the grandmother stated, "He takes my clothes to see if the skin fits." The following morning, the woman did not awaken. Following her passing, the wardrobe was taken apart. Within the wall, a cutout was discovered on the interior side, as if someone could have accessed the space between the apartments from within. However, there were no openings on either side. The wall was solid. Only in the plywood was something carved, resembling a handprint. It was not the print of an adult, nor was it that of a child. The wardrobe was incinerated. At least, that was the belief, because 2 years later, it was reportedly spotted at a dump, standing by itself, and with its door slightly open. Fact 59th. In Volgograd, in the year 1992, a display was discovered in the attic of an old school, concealed behind a wooden panel. On it were photographs of students, signatures written by hand, and a sign stating, "Distinguished in observation." All the images were black and white and indistinct, as if captured surreptitiously. Some featured children with their eyes closed, and others showed shadowy figures alongside the students. No teacher could remember these particular children. The records did not align. One of the assistant principals recognized his own last name in a caption, despite not possessing a corresponding photo. Efforts to study the negatives proved unsuccessful. They were not located. Subsequently, a 10th grade student shared that the walls in the old biology classroom would whisper during the night. He captured this on a recording device. The audio starts with ambient sound, followed by a voice that says, "They were still distinguished, and now they are looking at you." The students soon relocated from the city. The display was taken apart, and the photographs were incinerated. However, at a later time, a list appeared in the teacher's room headed Distinguished in 2022. This list included 7 individuals. 5 of them met their demise through peculiar events. The remaining individuals have not made contact. Fact 60. An unusual documentary about Siberian weavers was screened in an old Rostov-on-Don cinema in 1986. The showing had no audience except for the projectionist. He later claimed to have witnessed another film. Instead of the documented weavers, he described seeing an empty house with self-opening doors and a whisper from a chimney. "He is close, don't look back." The film reel was verified as original, without any modifications. Nevertheless, the projectionist maintained that the displayed content differed. Following this event, he adopted a daytime sleep schedule, fearing slumber in darkness. He vanished a month later. The cinema was torn down in 1997. On the site where the cinema once stood, an underground parking facility was constructed. Security cameras at this parking facility experience a 15-second malfunction annually. During this malfunction, a brief image is displayed: a white hallway, a descending staircase, and a figure positioned near a dark screen. This occurs annually at midnight on December 13th. The reason for this phenomenon remains unknown. The system requires manual intervention to restart, resembling the activation of a pause function. The 61st fact. In the year 1970, in a village close to the Kurchatov Institute, children discovered an abandoned shed. The door bore the inscription, "While he sleeps." Inside, only dust, cobwebs, and an odd metal construction resembling a chair were present. A frozen puddle of water lay on the floor, despite it being July. One boy, Vova, jokingly sat in the chair. A few minutes later, he announced, "Do you hear that? He's finally awake." The others fled. Vova vanished the following day. His possessions were left behind, and the shed's door was locked. A decade later, another boy from the same village started uttering disjointed phrases. He was sitting in the chair, said the stairs didn't go where they should, don't sleep when it's cold underneath. He had not been taught these words. In 2001, during a subsequent examination of the shed's remnants, a researcher found a date scratched onto the wall, 2026. Adjacent to it was written, "He will emerge if we forget." The shed was set ablaze. Yet, even on the scorched ground, the thermometer registered a temperature 5 degrees lower than the ambient air. It was as if the cold retained a memory of its origin. Fact 62nd. In Nizhny Tagil, during 1991, a woman named Maria reported to the housing office that a second reflection had appeared behind her bathroom mirror. This reflection moved a bit slower than she did, occasionally pausing and appearing to look. Her neighbors found this amusing. The situation shifted when the house experienced electrical failures. All screen-equipped devices began displaying identical symbols nightly: 3 black bars on a white background, accompanied by the text, "It is watching." Maria ceased going outside. The last sighting of her was in the morning, standing still before the mirror. She disappeared the following day. The apartment door was secured from within. The mirror bore a palm imprint applied from its reverse side. Upon removing the glass, an inscription was discovered on the wall behind it. "I was the first, but now there are 2 of us." The building remained until the mid-2000s before it was consumed by fire. The origin of the blaze was not identified. Nevertheless, a firefighter on duty at the time later stated that while ascending the stairs, a fragment of mirror on the floor reflected their group with an additional individual. The 6th person was located in a space that should have been empty. Fact 63rd. Divers in 1984 examined an old bridge near Ust-Kut that had submerged due to a flood. One diver discovered a manually carved niche beneath a support. Inside, he found an old road sign indicating 200 meters ahead and a ceramic doll in excellent condition. He brought the doll ashore. That night, the diver experienced hallucinations, hearing knocks on his windows. Shadows moved on his walls, and the mirror displayed the message, "You took the wrong turn." His colleagues blamed oxygen starvation. However, the doll vanished 3 days later. Security footage captured its disappearance frame by frame. The diver became unreachable. His apartment was accessed, revealing damp, bare footprints on the floor leading to an open window. A fingernail-scratched phrase on the windowsill read, "He arrived for the one who disregarded the sign." Fact 64th. In the year 1973, in Smolensk, while renovating a former archive building, a hatch was discovered in the ceiling. It led to a confined area between floors with no stair access. Within this space, a wooden crate and a packet of documents were found. These documents were lists detailing names, birth dates, and death dates. The problem was that for some people, these death dates had not yet arrived. One of the builders found his name on a list, along with a date, 2 days away. He found it amusing and photographed the page. Later that same evening, he was struck by a truck and perished. The documents were destroyed by fire. However, one sheet remained intact. Since that time, periodically, every few years, an individual in the city receives an anonymous letter containing a copy of that specific page. The letter concluded with a message. "If you are reading this, your time has already begun. It's too late to run. Just stay silent." There are no official confirmations of this event. Nevertheless, it is known that the local print shop has received multiple orders for engraved nameplates that subsequently appeared on tombstones prior to their official recording at the morgue. Fact 65th. In the year 1996, at a manufacturing facility in Tula, a machine operator chose to review the technical maintenance journal. He reported that peculiar entries, written in pencil, started appearing in the spaces between shifts. He watched, he touched the metal. At first, it was assumed to be a practical joke. Subsequently, however, handprints, seemingly scorched onto the material, were discovered on components worked on overnight. One employee mentioned observing a shadow with unusually long arms bending over the machinery. He was dismissed due to intoxication. 1 month later, his colleague vanished, disappearing during the course of his night shift. The machine persisted in its operation, and the only remnant on the seat was a dried smear of black lubricant. Within a few days, the journal was updated with the phrase, "He left. Now you." The journal was destroyed in a fire that occurred in the storage area. The cause of the steel's ignition remains unknown. The machine on that particular production line continues to activate spontaneously, irrespective of the power supply being cut off. During these occurrences, the camera feeds display a black screen. This is a consistent pattern. Fact 66th. In 1981, a schoolgirl in Irkutsk named Luda began a dream diary. She stated that each night she entered the same corridor. It was long, made of wood, with doors lining both sides. At first, the corridor was empty, but later a silhouette appeared by one of the doors. The silhouette remained still, yet it drew nearer with every dream. Luda documented all details, wall colors, the steps required to reach the door, and the scent, describing it as smelling like old water. Her final diary entry was, "He is at my door. I will attempt to stay awake tonight." The girl did not wake up the next morning. Medical professionals could not identify a cause, as all her vital signs were normal. However, her younger brother reported hearing Luda speak in her sleep that night, saying, "He is past the threshold. If it opens, go, but do not look at his face." Following her passing, the diary vanished. Yet her literature teacher discovered a sheet of paper with unfamiliar handwriting while reviewing student work. This sheet contained a layout of the corridor and the inscription, "Number 12, it has opened." The subsequent week, another student became ill. She started drawing the identical corridors and the very same door. Fact 67th. In the year 1998, in Kharkiv, an amateur photographer discovered a box of processed but not yet printed negatives within a photo laboratory. The images depicted typical scenes, streets, building entrances, and individuals' faces. However, on several frames, a consistent figure appeared in the corner, an individual dressed in black, perpetually positioned at a distance, within shadows and not in focus. This figure was not integrated into the depicted scenes, and no one present in the photographs acknowledged its presence. The photographer responsible for these images was unidentified, and the film itself was anonymous. The photographer commenced an examination of the frames, magnifying one particular shot. He observed that the figure's clarity increased with each successive photograph. In the final image, the figure was positioned directly adjacent to the camera lens. 2 days later, the photographer vanished. His colleagues reported that his behavior became unusual. He advised against looking through the viewfinder, took pictures without aiming, and covered the camera mirrors. The last footage from surveillance cameras showed him standing near the wall of a darkroom, gazing into a corner. Something was stirring in that corner. Upon developing the final roll of film, it yielded a single photograph, an image of his own back with another person's hand placed upon his shoulder. Fact 68. In 1975, school children in the Moscow region were on an excursion to the house museum of a writer. They saw a typewriter there. The guide stated that the writer's final words were typed on this machine. A boy, Vitya, asked if he could try using it. He went over and pressed a key. Instead of a letter appearing on the ribbon, the message read, "He is still here. Don't turn around." Vitya was taken away, but afterwards he started to stutter. A week later, his mother found repeated phrases in his notebooks. "He looks through the letters. Don't type A." Upon examination of the notebooks, it was discovered that on every page, the letter A was slightly misshapen, as if it had been pressed with more force than the other letters. The boy vanished shortly after. The typewriter was removed from display. However, night watchmen reported hearing clanking sounds from the hall during the night. The table supporting the typewriter started to crack down the middle, as if an unseen heavy object was applying pressure from beneath. The museum closed its doors a year later. An unusual note was found in the inspection records. The sound of typing can be heard even without paper. The whereabouts of the typewriter remained unknown. One day, in a different city, it was identified by a dent on its cover. It was found in an attic, covered in dust and bearing fingerprints. Fact 69. A geological party in Norilsk in 1986 reported an anomaly. Compasses near a certain pass started to shake. The needle didn't spin, but vibrated subtly, as if sensing something. One staff member, Sokolov, proposed staying the night. He pitched a tent and started a journal. The final entry stated, "He is moving in a circle. 5 steps left, 3 steps back, not breathing." The next morning, the tent was found empty. Yet, around it on the ground was a perfectly circular path made by bare feet. At its center lay a cassette with a recording. It contained heavy breathing, silence, and a single whisper. "If you're listening to this, he's close." A month later, another geologist, unaware of the first event, found himself in the same area and reported similar feelings. He was saved, but he kept saying, "I heard him counting. He moves according to numbers. He's almost done counting." The pass was removed from all itineraries. Even now, no one uses its name. It's known only as the place where clocks stand still. Fact 70. In 1993, in the Samara region, teenagers were playing near an abandoned water tower. One of them found an old door leading to the basement and decided to descend. Downstairs, the floor was damp concrete with metal pipes, nothing out of the ordinary. The only thing on the wall was written in red paint, "If you heard the name, it's already too late." That same evening, the boy mentioned hearing a voice whispering his name from the darkness. Then, the voice started mimicking his movements. It copied me, but slowly, like it was delayed. The boy vanished 3 days later. His friends returned to the location. Beneath the basement door were prints of bare feet. A girl standing by the entrance heard her name, uttered very faintly, Not by the boy, but by someone with a hoarse sound, as if passing through rusty pipes. The building was soon torn down. When an attempt was made to construct a store on its site, the excavator malfunctioned 3 times, and a low hum, like deep breathing from beneath the earth, emanated from the pit. The boy's name is no longer uttered, yet he is still being called, occasionally, in a whisper. Fact 71. In the year 1988, a videotape without any markings was discovered in a local library in a small mining town close to Kiselevsk. The cover bore no title or stickers, only the scratched inscription, "Watch Alone." The librarian, opting to examine its content, started the tape. Initially, the screen was blank, followed by an image of a poorly lit room. At its center was a chair which was empty. A whisper, audible only upon increasing the volume, could be heard from off-screen. "He sits when you turn it off." After 15 minutes, the chair in the frame moved slightly and then commenced a slow rotation. The camera did not move. The last frame momentarily displayed a face, unidentifiable, blurry, as if viewed through glass. Following the viewing, the librarian ceased to speak. Medical professionals recorded reactive mute hysteria. Later, a note was found on his apartment wall. "He sits in the corner where the light doesn't reach." The tape vanished. Yet, after some years, a copy reportedly reappeared in a private collection. Those who attempted to watch it until its conclusion stated that the room became cooler, and the adjacent chair turned by itself. Fact 72nd. In the year 1990, workers at the warehouse of an old furniture plant in Perm found a wardrobe that was not documented in any inventory list. The wardrobe's doors were sealed shut with wax. Inside, there was nothing but a paper tag on a nail with the words, "He who opens it must look first." A security guard who took the wardrobe to his home soon started reporting hearing rustling noises from within at night, similar to footsteps on wood. Later, a soft voice began calling him by name. Neighbors corroborated that during the night, the sound of the wardrobe's doors opening was audible in his apartment, though by morning, everything was back in its original position. The guard vanished a week later. His apartment contained only the wardrobe, which now had a mirror on its inner side. The reflection revealed a bed, a room's corner, and a dark funnel behind the person looking. The wardrobe was returned to the warehouse. However, the night watchman on duty that night asserts he witnessed the doors opening on their own, and a silhouette briefly appeared in the depths. Since that time, no tenant has agreed to lease the building. The wardrobe remains in the corner. No one gets close to it. Fact 73rd. In Yaroslav, during 1971, teenagers discovered a map drawn in chalk on the wall of a multi-story building's basement. The map featured corridors, arrows, and inscriptions like "Avoid," "Do not step," and "Time is here." In the center, there was a circle labeled "The point where he repeats." At first, it was dismissed as a joke, but one of the residents, inspecting the map, pointed out that it matched the structure of the building's actual basements, including those that had been bricked up during construction. He went to check. He came back half an hour later without a word. Afterward, he started taking down all the clocks in his apartment, stating, if he sees the time, he will pick someone. He vanished 2 days later. In the basement, an inscription reappeared, looking like chalk but indented into the brick. "You have started the count again." The building remained until the early 2000s. Demolishing it proved impossible. Machinery malfunctioned, and workers refused to enter the basement. It was later found out that every 7 years, someone disappeared from there. This always occurred in October, on the same specific day. A circle is still clearly visible on one part of the wall that was never painted. It remains there. Fact 74th. In the year 1964, a wooden plaque was discovered in Moscow on the old attic of a Dochodny dome during its demolition. The plaque bore the burned inscription, "Here he stood when everyone was asleep." Below it, the floor showed a polished patch, suggesting prolonged standing in one spot. Adjacent to it was a sealed tin container. Upon opening, it revealed pocket watches that ran in reverse and a newspaper fragment with a cutout article. The headline was only partially legible. Series vanished on Patri. No archival records substantiated the publication of such an issue. The watches ceased functioning the moment they were taken out of the container. That same day, 3 construction workers suffered panic attacks. One reported seeing someone in the mirror not on the correct side, while another described a shadow moving independently of a person. The construction project was suspended. The building was eventually demolished a month later, but 3 members of the crew later disappeared without a trace. In the new skyscraper erected on the same location, residents frequently experience electronic clock malfunctions, specifically in apartments facing northwest, the area where the plaque was originally situated. Fact 75th. A schoolboy in Voronezh in 1995 presented a peculiar sheet of paper during a history class. He stated that he had discovered it within an old textbook that had been left at the library. The paper resembled a newspaper clipping but bore a future date, April 12, 2024. The text detailed events that had not yet transpired, including a fire at a shopping center, a bridge collapse, and multiple electricity shutdowns. All accounts were written in the past tense. The teachers attributed it to a practical joke. The paper was confiscated. However, a decade later, on April 12, 2005, a fire did break out, and subsequently, other occurrences aligned with the described details. Efforts to locate the document were made, but it was lost. The student himself later recounted that the paper appeared by itself, situated between pages that were previously empty. In the same library, on the identical shelf, an additional fragment was discovered, this time marked with a different date. It bore a single sentence, "Do not read aloud. He hears and prepares." This fragment also disappeared. Nevertheless, a duty log remains in the archive, noting for April 12th, the paper returned. Fact 76th. In a settlement near Saransk in the year 1982, a village math teacher would walk every evening on the same trail behind the school. A year later, he started observing that at a specific spot on his route, the shadow cast by his body divided into 2. One was the familiar shadow, and the other lagged a bit, proceeding at a different angle. He took a photograph of this. The image indeed displayed 2 figures. One was positioned with its hands by its sides, while the other had a hand as if reaching towards the first. The teacher ceased his strolls. However, the shadow manifested in his home, on the kitchen wall, irrespective of the illumination. He noted in his diary, "The second shadow stood beside me. It records my gaze." A week later, neighbors heard a loud noise, akin to something collapsing within the house. The teacher passed away. Soot, resembling 2 figures standing together, was left on the kitchen wall. The house was destroyed by fire under peculiar circumstances. One of the firefighters mentioned that prior to the ignition, he had observed a silhouette in the kitchen window. It remained motionless. It merely observed. 77th fact. In 1977, in Omsk, communications enterprise workers performed a technical audit. They found an old, unconnected telephone that was still signaling. They unplugged it, but it rang again the next day. Picking up the receiver yielded only silence. After 20 seconds, a whisper stated, "Thank you. Now I know where you are." The phone was thrown away, but it reappeared in the storage room. A paper attached to it with a date and signature was new. The ink and paper were not from that time. Experts believed it was a joke. This changed when one of the technicians vanished. His final call was logged from a number that was no longer in service. Upon complete disassembly of the telephone, a note was discovered within. "While you wait for the dial tone, it's already coming." Subsequently, the building's purpose was changed. The new organization at the same site experiences regular telephone failures. Additionally, once per month, an incoming call is recorded in the call log. It lacks a number and is signed Answer received. 77th fact. In 1977, in Omsk, telecommunications company staff conducted a technical review. They found an old, disconnected telephone that was still signaling. They unplugged it, but it rang again the next day. Picking up the receiver yielded only silence. After 20 seconds, a whisper said, "Thank you. Now I know where you are." The phone was thrown out, but it reappeared in the utility closet. A paper attached to it with a date and signature was recent. The ink and paper were not of that era. Specialists thought it was a prank. This changed when one of the technicians disappeared. His last call was from a number that no longer existed on the network. When the phone was fully disassembled, a note was found inside. "While you wait for the dial tone, it's already coming." The building was then repurposed. The new organization in the same place frequently experiences telephone disruptions. And once a month, an incoming call appears in the call log. It has no number. The entry is signed, "Answer received."
Fact 78th. In the year 1966, in Astrakhan, a drawing instructor in one of the schools permitted a student to use an old protractor that had been discovered in the utility closet. The following day, the boy started to report that the lines on his paper were spontaneously deviating to the side. His drawings were precise, yet the outcome was distorted. On one occasion, while constructing an angle of 90 degrees, he produced a shape that looked like a spiral. Later that same evening, the drawing materialized in chalk on the wall of the room, despite the boy's assertion that he had not transferred it. After a week, he ceased speaking. The pages of his notebook contained a phrase repeated hundreds of times. "He returns along an arc. We charted his course." The protractor vanished. The room began to experience disruptions. Furniture would creak during the night, and the corners of the technical drawings would start to curl on their own. When a geometer was summoned to examine the building's base, he commented, "The area is incorrect. There ought to be less space here than there is." The room was bricked up, yet the walls occasionally remain moist, as if something is drawing on them from within. Exclusively with a compass. Fact 79th. In the year 2003, in Kaliningrad, an archivist named Gleb was in the process of digitizing a collection of World War II letters. Among these letters was an unusual one, lacking a date and signature, penned in neat, almost clerical handwriting. The message read, "I survived because I listened to his steps. He always steps on the 5th board, then stops." No details regarding the letter's provenance were available. The paper itself was modern. The handwriting did not correspond to any known wartime styles. The next day, Gleb took the letter home with him. On the following evening, neighbors heard him pacing his floor, measuring out steps with precision and repetition. After an hour, silence ensued. Relatives summoned to the scene found him barefoot, seated in the kitchen's corner. He remained silent, his fingers moving as if engaged in calculation. A trampled path was found on the floor, indicating a pattern. 5 steps, followed by a pause, then a turn. This sequence was repeated. The walls remained in place, but in one corner, concealed beneath the wallpaper, an additional sheet of paper was discovered. It was empty, save for a brief inscription at the bottom. "Now you are the 5th." Fact 80. In 1994, in a village near Moscow that had been deserted since the 60s, tourists who were local history enthusiasts discovered a house in a state of semi-ruin. A message written in charcoal on the door read, "Sound lives here." Inside the house, they found dust, broken furniture, and an old window frame missing its glass. Yet, in the middle of the room, there was a gramophone that was spotlessly clean. It had no wires attached, nor any indication of recent interference. They chose to activate it. It began to play. Although it lacked a needle, a grating noise emanated from it, followed by a woman's voice stating, "You are late. He is already inside." One of the tourists let out a cry and fled. The rest of the group were rendered speechless. After a period of 3 days, they revisited the house. The gramophone and the inscription were gone. However, on the wall, written in the dust by a finger, was the message, "Do not listen a second time." Subsequently, one of the tourists started experiencing nocturnal scraping sounds, a noise that did not originate externally but seemed to emanate from within his ears. Medical examinations yielded no findings. He personally recorded this noise using a dictaphone. Upon playback, a second voice recording emerged on the tape. He now hears what you hear. The tape vanished during its transit to the archive. This fate also befell everyone who had listened to it. Fact 81. In the year 1970, in Vitebsk, within a dormitory room that had recently seen a change of occupant, the person in charge of the floor discovered a mirror not recorded in the inventory. It was positioned in the corner, propped against the wall. Upon the new resident, a student named Yuri, attempting to relocate it, the glass vibrated, and he recounted seeing his reflection from behind for a fleeting second. During that period, he started observing that his reflection in the mirror was not moving in sync with him, falling further behind. On the 4th night, he penned a note stating, "If I do not go into the reflection, he will come into me." By morning, the door was secured. Yuri could not be found. A crack had appeared in the mirror. Fingerprints were present on the lower section, suggesting an attempt by someone to emerge from within. The mirror was then placed in the basement. Several years later, it was inadvertently sent for disposal, but a glass worker declined to handle it, remarking that it hums, not through the ear, but through the bone. Its current whereabouts are unknown. However, on a later occasion, in a comparable room at a different dormitory, a student reported that his reflection had begun to appear closer than his own person. Furthermore, the reflection's gaze was directed slightly downward. Fact 82nd. In Kazan, during 1999, a taxi driver picked up a quiet passenger late at night. The man entered the rear seat, provided an address, and stayed still for the entire trip. Upon reaching the destination, the passenger exited, leaving a cassette on the seat with the inscription, "Do not repeat the route." The driver played the tape at his home. The recording contained the noise of tires, his own voice, and an unfamiliar second voice. This unknown voice was giving directions for turns, mentioning street names, and instructing him where to look. The recording ended with the statement, "Now you are driving. He will be near." The taxi driver vanished that same night. His vehicle was discovered on the shoulder of the road, engine running, doors ajar, with no one inside. The same cassette, rewound to its conclusion, was placed on the dashboard. Subsequently, stories began to spread throughout the city. If one travels the identical route for multiple nights in a row after dark, they might encounter the passenger without a route. He enters the vehicle, remains silent, but is not visible in the rear-view mirror. Should you happen to hear a voice offering directions, disregard it. This is because you are already heading to a different destination than your intended one. Fact 83rd. In the year 1983, in Vologda, a box of children's books was discovered at a book printing house warehouse. These books were not accounted for on any invoice. The book featured a cover with a cartoon forest and the title, "Look Deeper," without any author's name. The text within was unusual. Phrases commenced like a standard fairy tale, but concluded with odd statements such as, "And then the bunny closed its eyes because he was down there," or "The fox went down the path where snow hadn't fallen because they still remembered." The illustrations were distorted, showing characters with eyes in the wrong places and trees with human hands. A printing house employee gave the book to his daughter. After 2 days, the child stated that the bunny visits at night, but without eyes, and whispers from beneath the floor. On the same night, the parents found a page under their daughter's bed, filled with fine print. A dirty paw print was also present on the page. The book was destroyed by fire.
However, the following day, a new copy arrived in the family's mail. It lacked a return address. Inside, it bore only the signature, "Now you have read. Now he knows."
Fact 84th. In the year 1990, in Murmansk, a student dormitory experienced a 3-day water outage. A student named Sasha descended to the basement to inspect the pipes. He did not come back. Upon entering the utility room, the watchman discovered a note on the door that read, "Listen before it gets dark." Inside, the pipes were dry, but a puddle of non-evaporating, warm water lay on the floor. Sounds resembling slow, heavy breathing emanated from the center of the puddle. The watchman vanished an hour later. During the basement search by rescuers, a flashlight dropped into the puddle, and its light was seemingly absorbed without reflection. The water vanished within 24 hours. The only trace left on the floor was a damp impression of bare feet. Consequently, in that dormitory building, dripping noises are occasionally heard in the showers, even when the faucets are off. Furthermore, a fogged inscription appears on the bathroom mirror. "You heard him. He now knows what you sound like." Individuals who recite this aloud are later heard moving about at night, irrespective of whether they have departed. Fact 85th. Geologists on the Kola Peninsula in 1972 documented an unusual area. Within this zone, radio transmission ceased and clocks fell behind by 15 minutes. A strange stone was located at the area's core, exceptionally smooth without any lichen, appearing recently processed. An engineer attempted to mark the stone. 10 minutes later, he experienced hallucinations, reporting he heard someone testing voices, with the sounds growing nearer. He was taken to the medical post but disappeared overnight. Subsequently, the stone began to feel warm when touched, irrespective of weather conditions. Photos taken nearby did not develop. Geologists' reports mentioned hearing phrases in a familiar voice but with altered intonation from the zone's center at night. When the site was scheduled for blasting to avert mishaps, a crater formed at the blast's origin. The earth inside became black and unanalyzable. Yet, annually, vapor emerges from it, and cameras capture a voice identical to that engineer's, stating, "I didn't immediately realize I had become an echo." Fact 86th. In 1988, in Kurgan, at the kindergarten named Solnishko, it was observed that the children in the Romashka group were engaged in a strange game. They would gather in a circle, state names, and then become still. The educators considered it a childish whim until one day a boy named Grisha uttered another child's name, causing that child to faint. The children clarified, "He selected him that way. Grisha is next." Grisha vanished a week later. A sheet of paper with uneven writing was found on his bed. He became the last but not the final. The voice is already within the circle. The teacher remembered hearing this phrase during her own childhood, in a different kindergarten, in another city. Records indicated that in the late 1970s, a child had also gone missing from that kindergarten. His final game involved the same elements, a circle and naming people. The leader role changed each time. Following this event, the group was dissolved. Subsequently, a child from an adjacent area drew a schematic of the game. A circle, arrows, and eyes in the middle. Underneath the drawing were the words, "You named them, you are no longer the one choosing." Fact 87th. In the year 1992, on the outskirts of Arkhangelsk, a man discovered a box containing tapes in an old barn. Each tape was marked with a single word, silence. Upon playing the first tape, only ambient noise, similar to wind, was audible. However, after 5 minutes, faint breathing became apparent. This was followed by a voice stating, "You hear this," which means he is nearer. The remaining tapes were not played. The man shared this experience with his neighbor, who opted to listen to the second tape. On this tape, the voice repeated the man's name continuously, becoming louder and more distinct with every passing minute.
During that same night, the power failed in the house where the listening took place. Both individuals vanished. Only one tape was recovered, stopped at the pause function. A new message was written on its sticker. The next person to play this will let him in. The police seized the tapes, but at the evidence warehouse, they were inexplicably found in a different arrangement. The staff member in charge of their safekeeping resigned 2 days later, leaving this statement in his personnel record: "Silence is not the lack of sound, it is him breathing."
Fact 88. In a Kaluga nursing home during 1979, a resident, former engineer Nikolai, stated that he heard counting every night. The sound began softly and then intensified. Nikolai attempted to record the numbers he heard, but his records consistently stopped at 99. The night he heard the count reach 100, the entire building was awakened by his scream. Nikolai was found sitting on his bed, pointing to a corner and whispering, "He's finished counting. It's my turn now." He was moved to the psychiatric department, where he remained silent permanently. A sheet with a single number 100 was discovered on his table. Below it was an odd inscription, seemingly in another person's handwriting. "He counts backward next." A week later, another resident exhibited comparable behavior. Medical staff tried to remove the writings, but numbers emerged on the ward's walls during the night, descending from 100. An orderly later admitted to waking up in the duty room due to breathing sounds and a distinct utterance: 41, 40, 40. He subsequently resigned. Ward 100 was subsequently converted into a storage closet.
Fact 89th. In Krasnoyarsk, in 1985, a student named Anya created an unusual design during her work education class, a circle with 4 dots and interior curved lines. To her teacher's inquiry about its meaning, the girl stated, "It's how the door appears when he knocks." At first, it was dismissed as a child's imagination. But that night, Anya's mother heard a noise in the corridor resembling claws scratching the floor. The door was secured. By morning, the apartment held the identical drawing etched on the inner side of the doorframe. Anya started writing backward, speaking in hushed tones even without direct address. Her journal recorded, "He enters only where his image is made." The family vanished within a week. The apartment contained marks suggesting something had moved across the ceiling. A chalk circle marked the wall. The house was subsequently vacated. Nevertheless, children from the adjacent yard report that approaching the building's entrance at night allows one to hear wood being scratched. Light is visible from a shut window, and a faint whisper is heard, "Watch out, don't draw it again." Fact 90. In Nizhny Novgorod in 2001, a suitcase containing film was discovered in the attic of an old house. The label stated, "Do not watch alone." The recording was 20 minutes long. The footage features a man seated in an empty room. The camera was positioned statically. The initial 15 minutes of the recording were silent. Subsequently, the man starts turning, as if hearing footsteps, but there is no one present. Towards the end, he stands, approaches the lens, and utters, "Now you are watching. Now I see you." The individual who found the film worked as an editor for a local television channel. He viewed the recording at his residence by himself. The following morning, he failed to report for work. His apartment was found unoccupied. However, on the screen of his television, which remained powered on, the final frame was replaying: the room, the camera, an empty chair. Behind the chair, a faint silhouette was visible. Subsequent efforts to duplicate the film were unsuccessful, as the technology would burn out. One technician succeeded in capturing a still frame. This frame displayed a window in which the camera was reflected, and the person operating it. Yet, the editor was alone.
Fact 91. In the year 1981 in Saratov, workers discovered a windowless room that had been sealed with boards from the interior.
Within it lay an old mattress, a pair of books, and a notebook. The notebook contained peculiar writings. He doesn't breathe unless I blink. The clock whispers when time is running out. If I shut the door, he will show up in the mirror. The final entry was smeared, suggesting it was written in a hurry. He sat down, he became me. I am outside the door. The construction workers found it amusing, but one of them opted to take the books. 3 days passed, and his wife mentioned that his behavior had become unusual. His speech had a distorted tone. He mixed up verb tenses, and he would spend nights sitting in a chair gazing at the unlit television. On the 4th night, she awoke to find him standing in the doorway. On the armchair, a man identical to him was seated. The second man vanished once the lights were switched on. The worker disappeared the following day. In his home, beneath the wallpaper, the inscription read, "He returns through those who took something that did not belong to them."
Fact 92nd. In 1997, in Petrozavodsk, a journalist from a local newspaper investigated a series of peculiar calls made to residents of a particular neighborhood. Everyone reported the same experience: silence in the receiver, then their name whispered, and then strange words, as if formed from Old Russian roots and Latin suffixes. One of the residents managed to record a call. Upon listening to the tape, the journalist started hearing these words even when not listening to the recording, in quiet moments, in the sound of turning pages, inside an elevator. He noted in his notepad, "Words don't reside in language, they move." A week later, his colleagues discovered him at the newspaper office. He was seated with his back to the door, repeating "non videbit," which translates from Latin to "will not see." His eyes were shut. They remained closed permanently. The recording was submitted for examination, but experts were unable to identify the sound's origin, as its frequencies fell outside the standard spectrum. One linguist, after hearing the recording, started speaking an invented language. A month later, the only recognizable word was the journalist's own name. Fact 93rd. In the year 1963, in Alma-Ata, a photojournalist took a picture of a street scene using black and white film. When developing the film, one photograph showed a figure amidst the crowd that was not there when the photo was taken. The figure was looking at the camera, but its face was unclear, as if smudged. The film was not damaged. The photographer chose to develop the rest of the pictures, and in each subsequent one, the figure moved closer. By the 4th picture, it was only a few meters away. By the 5th, it was nearly touching the camera's lens. The 6th picture turned out completely black. The camera was working properly. The following day, the photographer started to mention feeling like someone was behind him. The mirrors in his room began to become cloudy. In the darkness, he noticed a glint similar to the glint from a lens. After 7 days, this feeling vanished. In the lab, they only found the camera and a negative that had not been there previously. A frame that appeared to be shot from the same location, but now with no people present. It showed only the street and a shadow behind the lens. Fact 94th. In 1978, at a children's camp located under Penza, pioneers engaged in a nighttime fear room game, a common prank using sheets and a basement. A boy named Dima was the last to enter. When the other children attempted to frighten him, he showed no reaction, fixated on a single point. He then stated, "He is not playing. He resides here. I observed him prior to your arrival." Following this, the boy ceased speaking. He was sent home, but vanished shortly thereafter. 1 year later, in the camp's basement, which served as the scare attraction, a message inscribed with charcoal was discovered. "Why did you awaken him?" Although the inscription was not cleaned, it disappeared spontaneously. The counselors, in recounting the incident, recalled that during those nights, the basement was consistently filled with an unusual echo. Even a whisper would be repeated thrice, diminishing in volume with each repetition, the final echo sounding as if from another voice. Since that time, the basement has remained sealed. Nevertheless, children continue to share that by placing one's ear against the door and stating one's name, its repetition can be heard. Initially, your own voice, subsequently, another's. Finally, no one calls. He simply proceeds. Fact 95th. In the city library of Riga during 1980, employees started observing that certain books were altering their pages on their own. A particular novel would open to various chapters, even with bookmarks in place. Reference materials contain new paragraphs that were previously absent. Peculiar descriptions of imaginary locations and dates that aligned with future occurrences. Ilza, a librarian, recorded a sentence from one of these new pages. When he reads, the path will open. He reads with another's eyes. 1 week later, Ilza vanished, leaving behind a book on her desk that contained only mirrored word fragments instead of text. Expert analysis confirmed the typographical ink was authentic, yet no imprints were detected on the pages. A patron noted that when reading specific books, he felt as though the letters were looking at him. Consequently, a portion of the library's holdings was relocated to a separate archive with limited entry. A sign remains affixed to the shelf above the archive entrance, reading, "You read, he rewrites." Fact 96th. In the year 1993, a 9th grade student in Tula discovered an old record player with an unmarked vinyl record in a disused garage. When he attempted to play it, he heard not music, but a sound resembling the rustling of clothing and soft footsteps. Approximately half a minute later, a voice began to slowly say his name, elongating the vowels. The playback concluded with a sudden noise, akin to a strike. The boy shared this experience with his friends. One of them attempted to transfer the record's content to a cassette, but the tape recorder malfunctioned. A third friend reported that he had begun to notice a man wearing a hat in the reflections of shop windows. After 7 days, the boy vanished. A new inscription, etched into the plastic of the record player with a needle, appeared. "He's out." The unit was submitted for analysis, but subsequently went missing from the repository. An investigator, years later, noted in his journal, "Now it plays silently. Listen with more than just your ears." This journal was located where another teenager had disappeared, and on the barrage wall, an imprint reappeared. A circle and the silhouette of a slender hand. Fact 97th. In the year 1962, a watchmaker in Kyiv found that one of the pocket chronometers in his workshop was consistently falling behind by precisely 9 seconds each day. His attempts at repair, including replacing components, proved unsuccessful. After a month, the craftsman observed that whenever the clock stopped, the workshop fell into an unusual silence, with even the sounds from the street becoming inaudible. He decided to spend a night there. Upon dawn, neighbors observed condensation on the inside of the workshop window, along with distinct finger marks on the glass. The watchmaker had vanished. His workbench held only the clock, which displayed a time exactly 9 seconds slower than the reference. Years later, subsequent watchmakers occupying the space reported that the hands of a clock in the room's corner would occasionally move spontaneously in reverse. During these occurrences, a figure appeared in the opposite mirror. The face remained unclear, but the hands were invariably gloved and always 9 seconds nearer. Fact 98th. In the year 2002, in Yekaterinburg, in an apartment located on the 6th floor, peculiar electrical disruptions started happening. The light would only blink at exactly 3:11 in the morning. The owner of the apartment set up a surveillance camera. The footage showed that at this specific time, a reflection of a figure positioned in the kitchen materialized in the bathroom mirror. The kitchen was unoccupied during this period. The owner took down the mirror. The following day, moisture formed on the new bathroom tiles, taking the shape of a silhouette. A local electrician who inspected the electrical wiring observed that the wires within the wall appeared to be melted, but exclusively in the vicinity of the bathroom and kitchen. He stated, "This occurs when someone passes through electrical currents." After a week, the apartment's owner relocated. The subsequent tenant, 2 nights into their stay, reported hearing sounds akin to fingers tapping on a light switch. Nevertheless, the light remained unresponsive. An hour later, it was 3:11 a.m. once more. The electricity cut out. The camera captured a final image, a face pressed against the lens from the interior side. A caption which appeared later read, "I was merely observing. You opened the way." Fact 99th. In the year 1974, a chemistry student in Tomsk was experimenting with a developer discovered in an old laboratory cupboard. The chemical lacked any labels, yet when mixed with a standard photo liquid, the resulting images displayed figures that were not originally captured. A photograph of a typical lecture hall featured shadowy forms that no one present could recall seeing. One particular image depicted a dark silhouette positioned behind a glass pane, in an area where a solid wall should have been. The student persisted with his experiments, but he started reporting a sensation of being watched, stating he felt a gaze from the pictures. After a fortnight, he failed to appear for his classes. His dormitory room contained only photographic film displayed on the walls. Each piece of film showed the identical corridor, filmed from an overhead perspective, as if the photographer was suspended. The final frame was empty, consisting solely of white, with a faint inscription reading, "Now you are developed." The chemical's identity remained unestablished. All the photographs were removed from the archive within a year. Consequently, no developer has functioned in the laboratory since that time. The paper stays blank. However, on its back, shadows occasionally manifest.
Fact 100. In the year 1989, in Leningrad, a door that led nowhere was discovered in the basement of a museum that had been closed. On the reverse side, there was a wall. The door itself was upholstered in black fabric and featured a bronze handle. Above it, a plaque was affixed, bearing no letters, only 3 horizontal scratches. One of the restorers, while attempting to understand the construction, heard 3 knocks coming from the other side. The stone was solid and there was no discernible wall. The following morning, new letters appeared on the plaque. "You knocked." The remaining staff members advocated for the door to be sealed. However, the seals were found to be tampered with each night. On the 3rd day, a voice emanated from within the door, replicating the speech of one of the employees, but with an altered accent. Security cameras captured only darkness, as if a shadow had entered the space. After a week, the restorer vanished. A new plaque was found on the door. "One entered, one will leave." The museum eventually reopened years later. However, that particular basement remained locked. It was recorded in the inventory as non-exit transition. The precise meaning of this designation was unclear.